Interpol has named South Africa the rape capital of the world, where someone is sexually abused every 25 seconds. A woman born in South Africa has a greater chance of being raped than learning to read. On the 30th of July 2022, 8 women were brutally attacked, held at gunpoint, made to strip, and gang raped in an abandoned mine dump at Krugersdorp. Listen to what Police Minister Becky Cele had to say about the situation.
One woman was raped was raped by 10 men, not 10 times, by 10 different men. The other one by 8, the other one by 6, the other one by 4, 3, and all the one 19-year-old was lucky. It was lucky. If it is lucky, that was raped by one man, but every one of them.
In a country that has so little regard for the safety and autonomy of women, where the Minister of Police can dare to openly say without repercussions that a woman is lucky because she was only raped by one man? How can we trust the government to ensure the safety of our young girls as they implement the introduction of gender-neutral bathrooms in our schools? According to the draft guidelines for the National Department of Basic Education, DBE spokesperson Elijah Mhlanga states that the reason for introducing these genderless bathrooms and change rooms is so that gender non-conforming students don't drop out of school because they feel excluded. I would just like to point out that this is the same Elijah Mhlanga who thought it would be a great idea to use thirst traps to promote the department's Read to Lead campaign, a campaign which aims to improve the reading abilities of children. Putting aside his personal sense of morality and character, as difficult as that may be, Mhlanga's statements about not wanting gender non-conforming students to drop out of school seems altruistic. But you and I both know that when it comes to politics, and especially when it comes to South African politics, things are rarely as they seem. If you are at all familiar with the public education system in South Africa, you would have one of two responses. Either you would be scoffing and laughing hysterically at the utter ridiculousness of Mhlanga's statements, or you would feel what I felt when I heard this: visceral, boiling, inexplicable, pure rage. This has nothing to do with personal, political, or religious views on gender identity. It has everything to do with how millions of South African children are robbed of their basic human rights every single day. Sexual violence in South African schools is not a new phenomenon by any stretch. A study conducted by Isak Niehaus shows that sexual relations between teachers and schoolgirls in sub-Saharan Africa were common even in the 1950s. Today, it has been made even more prevalent by the continued bias and prejudice that exists against women in our country, as well as the inexplicable disregard for the autonomy and personhood of children. It is a hard pill to swallow that many South African cultures barely view children as human beings. Speaking of South African cultures, many South Africans have severely skewed, harmful views on sexual assault. One example of this is a survey conducted by the Human Rights Watch, which indicated that 8 in 10 men believed that women were responsible for causing sexual violence, and 3 in 10 thought that women who were raped asked for it. Another example is the fact that women and girls who are victims of sexual violence often don't want to report the crime to the police or even tell their family. And this may seem strange, but this is because in many communities, a woman's virginity is linked to her family honor. If her family finds out she's no longer a virgin, she can either be forced to marry her attacker or even be killed by her brothers or fathers for bringing such an embarrassment to the family. Furthermore, students interviewed at South African schools report having knowledge of multiple cases of rape, assault, and sexual harassment of girls that are committed by teachers and male students. They spoke of how girls are raped in school bathrooms, abused in empty classrooms and empty hallways, and even on the way to and from school. And what I find absolutely insane about all of this is that this is currently happening in our South African schools with bathrooms that are segregated by gender. So how much more opportunity for these egregious acts of violence will there be after the implementation of gender-neutral restrooms and change rooms in our schools? All this talk about gender-neutral bathrooms when more than 3,300 schools across the country still use pit latrines. Pit latrines or pit toilets are essentially 3-meter deep holes in the ground that are used for, well, toileting.
A toilet is a dignity issue, and it's been a dignity issue for as long as we have had them in the schooling system.
In one of the schools that were inspected, it was discovered that over 300 students and their teachers all had to share 3 of these pit latrines between them. And as crazy as it sounds, my main gripe with these toilets is not even the fact that it's unsanitary. It is the fact that children lose their lives plummeting 3 meters down into a pool of feces and urine.
When we look at the access to safe and adequate sanitation, the department has missed multiple deadlines to eradicate unsafe pit toilets from all schools.
January 2014, a man near Chebeng village in Limpopo province received a phone call asking him to rush to his 5-year-old son's preschool. The little boy was found dead, drowned at the bottom of a pit latrine. His father sued the school district, and this made national news almost a full decade ago. Yet, to this day, South African children lose their lives because of the blatant disregard and greed of the South African government and its officials.
Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's Gazette suggested that some provinces had not spent allocated funds meant to improve school infrastructure.
The state of the South African public school system is nothing less than abysmal. The minimum requirements for a student to pass a subject is 30%. 30%. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, 30% is so low, that's so easy. Surely South Africa must have a 100% pass rate at the end of high school. But no, even with the shockingly low pass requirements, 40% of students who start grade 1 don't finish grade 12. And even when students who do pass grade 12 start their education and training at technical and vocational colleges, 60% of them drop out in their first year simply because they're unable to cope with the academic demand placed on them by these colleges, as it's just too big of a step up from the inadequate education that they had been receiving through their schooling years. Hearing things like this just really puts into perspective why South Africa has the second highest youth unemployment rate in the entire world. Many South African public schools, and especially the ones in rural areas, are filled with unskilled, unmotivated, overworked, under-resourced, and in the worst cases, totally incompetent teachers. And when I say incompetent, I mean that these teachers don't even understand the maths that they're supposed to be teaching. They can't even speak the language that they're supposed to be teaching. And with the majority of South African children coming from under-resourced communities, all these kids have are their teachers. These children don't have access to technology like computers, smartphones, and iPads, and they don't have access to all the information on the internet that you and I so readily take for granted. These children's parents are also extremely likely to be uneducated themselves, so they can't even go home and ask their parents for help and understanding with their work. These kids are fully reliant on this broken education system for their knowledge, their development, for their futures.
In 2013, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga published the minimum norms and standards. This law was to ensure that every school in the country had access to water, electricity, internet, safe classrooms, and working toilets.
The Department of Education fails these children, fails their dreams of becoming better for their families, for their community, because the department fails to meet its own basic standards in delivering quality education to all South Africans. If you ask me, they need to focus on tackling the core issues impacting the poor educational outcomes at schools instead of trying to use gender non-conforming students as scapegoats for their carelessness. We live in a dysfunctional society where children are molested and harassed on a daily basis. We need to be working to eradicate that rather than introducing more avenues where this type of abuse can take place. Pray for South Africa, pray for our children, pray for our women, pray for our men. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more higher quality content from this channel, please consider supporting us through donating. My goal is to get enough money together to be able to get a mic so that I can up the audio quality for you guys to enjoy. Thank you. Okay, bye.